So you've heard Cindy read chapter 1, the full chapter, and I'm sure she didn't know that she was going to be reading a full chapter when she signed up for this, but sometimes the job's dangerous. So now what can I tell you about chapter 1 that you didn't already hear? Oh, well, for one thing, the Protestant Bible has Daniel placed within the prophetic books. Right after Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. And the thing is, Daniel's never brought forth as a prophet. So it's a little strange that he's in with the prophets, but the Jewish tradition places Daniel in the writings. And the writings are what is not the first 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch, and it's not the prophets. So Daniel is placed in the writings. I think they have it right. Most scholars agree that Daniel, the stories are fictional. They're not real. And the author or authors took folk tale humor and mixed it up with apocalyptic mystery to actually create a message of hope and encouragement for the Jews that were led and forced to live in Babylon. And what better setting than a king's court for a political and religious folklore story, because it speaks to surviving and thriving in a foreign, hostile land. The book of Daniel speaks to the truth that when things change, God is with you. God is with you always, knows where you are always. Yes, there's hope, even in Babylon. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon destroyed Jerusalem and then marched this large numbers of conquered Israelites. First they saw their town, their homes, everything shattered, their temple. And then they're marched off to Babylon. And not just everybody. They took the elite because the city can hardly prosper without the elite, the members of the royal family, the nobility, the craftsmen, the artists. They were all taken to Babylon. Daniel and his 3 friends were among those who were forced to march. Of the young exiled men of Judah, some would be chosen to serve in the king's court. And so additional attention was given to them to prepare them for this. They were educated in the Babylonian ways. Anybody here surprised that Daniel and his handsome friends, who were described as being without physical defect and perfect specimens, are you surprised that they would be chosen for the king's court to serve in the palace? Well, at first glance, we might think, boy, wasn't that Dan and his friends lucky that they got this gig that's in the palace. You know, they got nice clothes, good food, pretty ladies walking around. You know, you get the idea. It seems like they have it pretty good. But still, exile was the experience of a military defeat, deportation, and then oppression in a new and strange land. And that ended their days of independence. They might feel like they have some freedom, but they don't. Think of the Ukrainians who were taken to Russia, civilians and soldiers alike. It was the end of their independence. At the hands of Nebuchadnezzar, Jerusalem, its temple, and more was devastated. But the Babylonians weren't fools. They chose young people to be educated for palace work because they knew it's much easier to re-educate and introduce young people to changes in their lives, changes that might include their names, the food they eat, the way they dress, their lifestyle, and who and how they worship. Daniel and his friends' assimilation included being given Babylonian names, which the author prefers not to use. Now, the assimilation of these 4 young men kind of hit a brick wall when Daniel refuses to eat the same food and wine that the king himself is served. Now, I would jump at the chance to eat like a king or a queen. But diet, what is eaten and what is not eaten, is a major indication of Jewish identity. And Daniel's refusal to eat the food, it wasn't a hunger strike or a simple insubordination. It was quiet resistance. Daniel was determined that although the temple was a pile of stones, God was still with them in Babylonia. And Daniel was not going to defile his body with non-kosher food, and nor was he going to drink the king's wine, which incidentally was not forbidden by law. We're told Ashpenaz, head of the palace staff, liked Daniel by God's grace. And he agreed to give the 4 men different meals, their veggies and water only, a poor man's meal, and they thrived. Is it surprising that our Christian faith inevitably calls us to active rebelliousness or nonconformity with the world at times? Even in the way we live our daily lives, the food we choose to eat and the clothing we choose to wear. Consider John the Baptist. He made his own choices. The wild hair, the camel hair, the locusts and honey, yes. He made his choices, and initially the people looked at him and they thought he was weird, they thought he was strange, they were afraid of him. But after listening and hearing his words, they believed and they hungered for more. Well, Daniel chapter 1 is a powerful reminder to us to search within ourselves for those elements of the king's food and wine that we ought to resist for the sake of the gospel message. What or where are those areas in our lives? We have to look inside ourselves to find what those areas in our lives are where we know we can do better. We can make a better choice, but our ability to resist is at an all-time low. And then maybe we make a silent prayer. I'm sorry, God. I'll do better next time. But I digress. For the author of Daniel, food was just one symbol among many others in the young men's resistance to domination and total assimilation to the culture and ways of the dominant Babylonian powers. Now consider the Christian life, a life of resistance to the attraction of financial power and a control over the destiny of others. These are things we need to resist. We need to resist this feeling of having to control others. I don't know how we get that to the leaders of our nations, though. We have to talk really loud. There are temptations we have for luxury that result in the abuse of underpaid laborers in struggling societies. For Christians from dominant cultures like North America, Australia, and Europe, a man like Ashpenaz, more than Daniel, provides a more appropriate role for resistance. Ashpenaz, who comes from the power of the privileged elite, appears to have sympathy for those who suffer and resist. Ashpenaz and other faithful among the elite, they must be aware that their faith borders on treason. And having kind words or sympathy for the exiled people could be dangerous. The first question we need to ask ourselves concerning Daniel chapter 1 is, what is the food and wine that the modern kings are offering us? It's crucial to know that sometimes these temptations can be disguised as necessities, like food. So much of advertising and marketing today is directed toward changing people's habits, to entice them to change their way, to buy products that will become necessities that they simply can't live without. I have a couple of those in my kitchen. U.S. consumers especially, aren't used to ask, we don't ask serious questions about our purchasing habits. Not only whether or not it's too much, but again, whether the spending and consumption supports a living wage and an environment that's safe for workers. There was a time, years ago, that when I shopped, I looked for the Made in the U.S. label. But gradually I stopped looking at labels. It was time-consuming, and I stopped. But last week, I checked several items of my clothing and found made in Pakistan, India, Indonesia, Vietnam, and of course, China. My suit was made in Jordan. Are we supporting the workers? The market entices us to ignore such matters that keep prices acceptable and paychecks low. But we are not to be enticed by the king's food and wine. A call to faithful resistance, it might require modern Christians to think through whole new ways of living our lives, so we stop defiling ourselves with the food and wine of kings and their militias, and begin to work with those exiled people whom these kings intend to control. Many of those people are right in our backyards. Not literally in our backyards, of course, but we don't have to look far to see the displaced, the refugee, the lost, the lonely, those who want and deserve a safe place to work, and a safe place to call home. Daniel chapter 1 effectively communicates powerful images of Jewish exiles who stand with faith and courage before the throne of the occupying and militarily superior emperor and king. And they stand there and they encourage us to do the same walk in the way of God, knowing wherever we are, God is there too. May it be so. And please, I invite you to return next Sunday for part 2 of the Daniel series.